The Hillside Stranglers are one of the most chilling and disturbing criminal duos in American history. This terrifying pair, who terrorized Los Angeles in the late 70s, were responsible for the brutal murders of at least 10 young women. These cold-hearted murderers were later discovered to be cousins named Kenneth Bianchi and Angelo Buono Jr. But what drove these two men to commit such heinous acts? How did they evade capture for so long? And what finally led to their downfall? Welcome to YARO Crime. Today, we delve deep into the twisted minds of the Hillside Stranglers, exploring their crimes and the shocking details of their eventual capture. Before we continue, please like the video and subscribe to the channel to stay up to date with our latest videos. Now sit back and buckle up as we explore the horrifying case of the Hillside Stranglers. Our story begins in October and into early November of 1977, with the murder of two prostitutes. The bodies of these women were found strangled and had been dumped clothless on hillsides to the north of Los Angeles. Yolanda Washington was the first victim of the Hillside Stranglers, and her body was found on October 17, 1977, on a hillside near the Ventura Freeway. Investigators discovered that Yolanda had been raped and had marks on her ankles, neck, and wrist. The second murder was reported on November 1, 1977, when a homeowner discovered the naked body of a girl in a residential area. The girl was identified as Judith Miller. Just like Yolanda, Judith had also been raped before she was strangled to death. Judith was last seen alive the previous night, talking to a man driving a vehicle. She was deceived by the stranglers into thinking they were undercover officers. She was then handcuffed, taken away, and eventually murdered. The police initially did not attribute these incidents to the work of a serial killer. However, when 5 girls were abducted from their middle-class neighborhoods, murdered, and dumped on hillsides, the police and the media began to pay attention. Given the fact that the bodies of the victims were always left on hillsides, the media began calling the murderer the Hillside Strangler, and this moniker stuck. At this point, the police and media were under the general impression that the hillside murders were the work of a single killer. They would soon discover how wrong this assumption was. 5 days after the murder of Judith Miller, another body was found. Just like Judith, the body had been stripped of clothes, raped, and strangled. The woman, Lisa Carson, was last seen the night before as she left the restaurant where she worked. It seemed like the Hillside Stranglers gained more confidence with each successful murder, and they seemed to increase the pace of their horrifying actions. In November of 1977, Laura Baker, daughter of actor Peter Lorre, was approached by Kenneth and Angelo. Just as they did with Judith, they pretended to be police officers and were searching for a way to abduct and murder Baker. However, when Baker produced her driver's license on request along with a photo of her and her father, the Hillside Stranglers decided to let her go as they feared murdering the daughter of a celebrity would bring very high media and police attention. Baker did not even realize that she had just escaped an encounter with the dreaded Hillside Stranglers. She would only realize how lucky she was when Kenneth and Angelo were finally arrested. Sadly, it seemed this encounter pushed the Hillside Stranglers to increase the rate of their crimes. 12-year-old Dolores Cepeda and 14-year-old Sandra Johnson boarded a bus home on November 13, 1977. They got off the bus and were last spotted approaching a sedan with 2 men inside. Their bodies were discovered 7 days later by a 9-year-old boy who was treasure hunting on a hillside. I can only imagine how traumatizing the sight must have been for that little boy. The news of the murder of these little girls came as a second punch combo, as the police and residents were still reeling from the discovery of the body of 20-year-old student Christina Weckler earlier that same day. True to the MO of the Hillside Stranglers, all 3 victims had been stripped, raped, strangled, and their bodies abandoned on a hillside. November 1977 was a bleak month for the residents of Los Angeles as the Hillside Stranglers committed and seemingly got away with murder after murder. On November 23, 1977, only 3 days after the discovery of the bodies of Dolores Sandra and Christina, the body of aspiring actress Evelyn Jane King was found in bushes near the Los Feliz Boulevard off-ramp of the Golden State Freeway. Evelyn went missing on November 9. and by the time her body was found, severe decomposition made it difficult for investigators to determine if she was tortured or raped before her death. Investigators could, however, establish that she was strangled. It was at this point that the authorities created a task force comprising officers from the Sheriff's Department, the LAPD, and the Glendale Police Department to catch the perpetrator. The media and locals were now calling the Hillside Strangler. The Hillside Stranglers struck once more in November 1977, with the murder of 18-year-old business student Lauren Ray Wagner. After she failed to return home at midnight, Lauren's parents found her car across the street the next morning with the doors open. When they questioned the neighbors, the woman who lived across the street told Lauren's father that she saw two men. The first was tall and young, and the second was older and shorter. She claimed that she heard Lauren scream saying, "You won't get away with this," as her abductors took her away. This eyewitness account was the first indication that the Hillside murders were not the actions of a single person, but rather that of a two-person team. In December 1977 and February 1978, the Hillside murderer struck again, killing two more ladies. Kimberly Martin was a 17-year-old cudgel and another unfortunate victim of the Hillside Stranglers. The Stranglers made a call to Kimberly's agency from a public payphone, and when Kimberly was dispatched, they tortured, murdered, and abandoned her body on a deserted lot. Cindy Hudspeth was the final victim of the Hillside Stranglers, and her body was discovered midway down a cliff on the Angeles Crest Highway on February 17, 1978. Cindy was only 20 years old, and like all the other victims of the Hillside Stranglers, she had been tortured, raped, and strangled. After an intensive investigation spanning over 11 months, Kenneth Bianchi and Angelo Buono Jr. were finally arrested and charged with their crimes. Before his arrest, Kenneth fled to Bellingham, Washington, where he was arrested after he raped and murdered two women he had lured to his house. During his trial, Kenneth's defense was on the grounds of insanity. He claimed that he had a dissociative identity disorder, and that the personality who committed the murders was different from his actual self. This was debunked, however, when he was observed by court psychologists who revealed that he was faking. When he saw that the only defense for his terrible actions had been exposed to the sham it was, Kenneth struck a deal and agreed to plead guilty, as well as testify against his cousin Angelo in return for a lighter sentence. On the final day of Angelo's trial in 1983, the presiding judge, Ronald M. George, made a statement during the sentencing that paints a good picture of the horrifying acts of the Hillside Stranglers and the justice they deserved. In his words, "I would not have the slightest reluctance to impose the death penalty, in this case, were it within my power to do so." Ironically, although these two defendants utilized almost every form of legalized execution against their victims, the defendants have escaped any form of capital punishment. Kenneth Bianchi is currently serving his sentence of life imprisonment, while Angelo Buono died of a heart attack on September 21, 2002, while also serving a sentence of life imprisonment. The horrifying case of the Hillside Stranglers has been retold in various movie adaptations. But however compelling these movies may be, they cannot compare to the terror women living in Los Angeles must have felt when the Hillside Stranglers were still on the prowl. Our thoughts and prayers go out to everyone who lost someone they cared about at the hands of the Hillside Stranglers. Thankfully, justice, even though it may have been delayed a little, was finally served. May all the victims of the Hillside Stranglers rest in peace. Thanks for watching. Let us know what you think of this case in the comments below. You can also leave a comment on videos you'd like to see in the future. And please do not forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications. Thanks again, and we'll see you in the next video.